presentation rather than having all of the documents emailed, not sure of the key points being reviewed or understood clearly. So I just wanted to put together something to highlight a lot of the key points and things that we need to have in consideration as we are moving forward spending out our budget and the programs that we are wanting to offer. So here we go. In total, we have $319,859.46 within our COVID budget. Our funding comes from Bering Strait Regional Housing Authority, which is $6,000. We have our CDC grant for $150,000. That deadline is to be spent before June 9, 2021. We have the grant from ACF. That is $41,050. The deadline is December 31 this year. Norton Sound Health Corporation for $5,000 to be spent before the end of this year, as well as the CARES Act for $117,809.46. So this is all of our funding within our COVID budget that we have available. Our key projects within our COVID budget is the office renovation, which includes the concrete foundation in the garage, the purchase of a new furnace and some office furniture, as well as the renovation with the contract with Pomerantz. The backup generator for the B&B, and also the generator house renovation to ensure that it has good ventilation and that it has adequate space for both generators. We have a project for the donated cabin from Solomon Native Corporation, which we would need to transfer or transport to the campsite by the shelter cabin, and then set it up as a quarantine cabin, which would include appliances, non-perishable items, setting up a sleeping quarter in there, just making it pretty much quarantine ready. Internet support for our community members, as well as the Zoom platform. COVID special meeting stipends plus staff and council technology costs. 75 laptops, which we have already purchased. We need to purchase PPE for our buildings, and we have already purchased pretty much all of our PPE for our CARES kits for our membership. Most of those have already been mailed out. I'm not sure on the status of how many more left need to be dispersed. We have staff salaries in our budget for COVID-related work, emergency assistance / struggling families, subsistence support, which is 2 freezers, our website upgrade to include online forms, a sat phone, which we have purchased already. The CARES Act guidelines are something that we need to have in the forefront of all of the decisions we make on our spend down. So 80%, it's more like 60%, but the 40% pretty have the basis of the CARES Act guidelines already. So things that we have to keep in the forefront of our minds is that, number one, that they are necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19. So everything that we spend money on has to be in direct relation to the COVID-19. Number two, that these budget items were not accounted for in our approved budget from earlier this year when we approved our tribal operations budget and other projects that we had approved earlier this year. Number three, that they have been incurred during the period of March 1st, 2020 up until December 30, 2020. So any event or budget items that have been in expense between the pandemic and the end of the year. This is from the Coronavirus Relief Fund facts. They had updated and distributed updates all throughout the year. So this is from June 24, and then this morning when I was looking at the facts, same info, same content, updated September 2nd. So this is all the same. May recipients use fund payments to provide emergency financial assistance to individuals and families directly impacted by a loss of income due to COVID-19? And the answer is yes. And obviously we know that is happening between other tribal communities throughout Alaska, where we have seen King Island and Nome Eskimo Chinook tribe offer payments to their tribal membership with an application to provide financial relief within the time frame of when the pandemic began. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that those communities had received way more in funding than Solomon has. So yes, we can provide financial relief on an emergency basis due to COVID-19, but we need to ensure that it has been a direct effect from COVID-19. What they say in here is that we can provide assistance for rent or mortgage to prevent eviction or foreclosure, for funerals or other emergency individual needs, but this all needs to be in a structured manner with an application or a policy to back it up. Another excerpt from the fund facts. Governments have the discretion to determine how to tailor assistance programs they establish in response. However, such a program needs to be structured in a manner that will ensure assistance is determined to be necessary in response to COVID-19. So, reiterating the previous slide and reiterating the CARES Act guidelines, the 1, 2, 3. So, for example, a per capita payment to residents of a particular jurisdiction without an assessment, aka an application for us to determine whether or not it was a direct effect, would not be an appropriate use of payments for the fund. So, for our financial assistance to our membership, this is something that I copy and pasted off of King Island's facts in their notice to their membership. So she briefed it up, in which I really liked, and I wanted to highlight that there are restrictions within this funding, meaning allowable and unallowable expenses. So per capita payment to residents of a particular jurisdiction, also known as our tribal membership, without an assessment is not appropriate. So direct checks or any type of funding issued to our tribal members is not appropriate and would need to be paid back to the U.S. Treasury. Direct checks could also affect our personal taxes. And if that happens, then we would be putting the tribe at risk of paying the U.S. Treasury back, as it's not within allowable guideline spending. And that could affect our relationship with the federal government in their hesitation on funding any future program or project. So just wanted to highlight that. And with the taxes, so in order for us to avoid our membership being taxed for us providing financial services slash financial assistance during this pandemic. You guys approved our resolution 2020-05, which is declaring the public health emergency. So this was necessary under IRS Code Section 139E, which is establishing a tribal general welfare program. So thank you for doing that, but I just wanted to reiterate how important this is in us moving forward when we're providing such services to our membership. And just to give you a little bit more information about the general welfare program, it is administered under specified guidelines, and it does not discriminate in favor of any members of our tribe. It is available to any of our members who meet such guidelines. It is for the promotion of general welfare. It's not lavish or extravagant, and it's not compensation for services. So us following those guidelines means that we are qualified to use this Section 139E in our taxes to kind of go through this loophole of not having our membership fill out the F-1099. This is an email chain from Judy Pearson, who works for the IRS, in regard to the F-1099. So there was a question, do tribal members have to meet income guidelines in order for them to receive direct payments from CARES money? And no, but you need to have to determine that based on any criteria, the funds are tied, meaning in order for them to receive direct payments, you need to have general welfare established, and we need to make sure that we're following the guidelines of, if we're going to be assisting with rent or mortgage, we have to require income information in the case that we are audited. So we have supportive documentation stating that, okay, we're not just paying rent for everybody, we're paying rent for the people that had been affected directly by COVID-19. Another email chain from Judy Pearson, are the payments at issue being made due to the economic harm caused by COVID-19? If yes, the Tribal General Welfare Program will apply, but if it is no, then yes, an F-1099 would be required. So here is a little web that I put together. So some of the services that we're wanting to offer is the Financial Relief Assistance Grant Program. We're going to be distributing laptops and providing internet financial support. And these were a big chunk of the funding budget line items within our COVID budget. So here is how they kind of tie in together. The COVID Relief Grant Program does need to be tied to our general welfare program. Our distribution of laptops does require an application and a policy per CDC guidelines, because our money for the laptops is being provided and funded by CDC, and that's their requirement. Our financial support for internet does need to fall under our Tribal General Welfare Program. And it also needs to follow a policy that we establish, has to have an application, and our Tribal General Welfare Program does have to have policies in place for those services that we are providing. It also needs to have the application in correlation with the policy. Our welfare program does have to have an approved resolution. And then, of course, we need staff and our council to manage all of this to ensure that we are using the funds appropriately, that we have everything in place in line, just in case we are audited. So there's that mess of a web for you. Do governments have to return unspent funds to the Treasury? Yes. We absolutely, any unspent funding come December 31 from ACF or from CARES Act does need to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. And what records must be kept by governments receiving payment? We have to keep sufficient records to demonstrate that the amount of fund payments to the government has been used in accordance with Section 601D of the Social Security Act, which was the CARES Act guidelines from one of the first slides. Okay, this is a lot of information. I'm just going to sum it up for you. The Office of Inspector General is who would be enforcing the CARES Act guidelines, enforcing compliance, and just ensuring that we are using our funds appropriately. So what applies to us is that grant agreements and grant subaward agreements entered into our CARES fund payments have all documents related to the awards. So that applies to us because we would be offering financial assistance for COVID relief, and we have to use the term that we are providing grants with an application process to adhere to their guidelines. We can't say, okay, we're going to pay their rent because they need it. We have to use the term grant. So we're offering small grants in assistance for our members that have been affected by COVID. And we need all documentation of our reports and our contractors like Pomerantz, and all grant recipient information, their application, their income criteria, if they are applying for rent or mortgage payment, any documentation supporting the performance outcomes of our contracts, our grant awards, and grant recipient subawards. So that all applies to us. So we need to make sure that we are collecting all the data necessary in support of why we are offering that service or that funding or the financial assistance. We need all of that documentation saved in a safe spot, and we have to keep it for 5 years, just in case we are audited. And we should only spend all of our COVID funding as if we were to be audited. With that in mind, all of the money, every penny, every dollar, we need to spend it as if we knew we would be audited. And it's just like any other federal fund that we receive as an entity. Any federal dollar, we need to act as though we're spending with a watchful eye to ensure that we are maintaining a good relationship with the federal government. So the 3 applications that we need to approve is, for one, this internet support application that I drafted. That will be attached to this so you can review, but this is a snapshot of what it looks like. We also need to approve our Relief Assistance Grant Program. This is the first 2 pages of it, which explains what it is offering and other assistance that we can offer if it does not fall in with the guidelines here. And then attached here is the 3rd and 4th page, which are application instructions, and then the application. There is another page that I did not attach in this presentation, but it is the income criteria information that would be necessary if they were requesting rent or mortgage assistance. We also need to approve a laptop application. CDC is patiently waiting for a policy or an application so that they can attach that to our grant award. And one thing that we need to think about is how we will distribute all 68 of them. We have 7 set aside for all council members. And so what we need to discuss and approve is we need to decide on a cap amount, how much max they are allowed to request in our COVID-19 Relief Assistance Grant Program. What we have available within our budget is $31,250, and keeping in mind we do have 55 households. Not to say every single household is going to request assistance, but if we're going to offer it to one person, we should also have it available for others as well. And that's why I put that in there. We need to decide who and how they will be qualified to receive a laptop. Like I said, we have 68 available. And then we need to figure out who we're going to hire to manage all of our intake for applications and the eligibility criteria, how they're qualified, and the process in which they will be awarded either the relief grant assistance program or a laptop or internet support. And the internet support is $450 reasonable, considering that somebody could be trying to catch up on their internet bill from beginning March, as we have become more of a virtual world and data fees and overages. We need to figure out if that amount is reasonable. We can also, consider whether or not we can just apply that as a credit moving forward, as long as they have their name on the internet bill. But what we have available for that is $30,750. So I hope this was helpful. I really hope that you can review this presentation prior to us meeting for our budget meeting, so that we can kind of make the most effective meeting as possible and approve what we need to.